There is a paradox sitting on airfields across Russia. It is a 46-ton colossus of steel and titanium, an aircraft that first flew in 1975, a relic of the mid-Cold War. By all logic, it should be a museum piece, a monument to a forgotten era of brute force Soviet engineering. Yet this aircraft is not only in active service, it is the fastest operational combat aircraft in the world. And it is not rusting away in the Arctic. It is at the absolute center of 21st century warfare, flying combat sorties as the designated launch platform for hypersonic ballistic missiles. This is the story of the Mikoyan MiG-31, NATO reporting name Foxhound. How can a 50-year-old interceptor, a flying brick designed to hunt bombers that never flew, remain one of the most strategically relevant and feared assets on a modern battlefield? The answer is not simple. It is a fascinating story of doctrinal panic, revolutionary technology wrapped in archaic metal, and a series of accidental future-proofing decisions that its designers could never have anticipated. The MiG-31's extraordinary longevity is not a case of simple life extension. It is a story of profound role transformation. An aircraft born for a mission of pure, desperate defense has, by a quirk of fate and physics, evolved into one of the most potent offensive strategic weapons in the modern world. To understand the Foxhound, you must first understand the spectacular failures of its father, the MiG-25 Foxbat. The Foxbat was a machine born of paranoia. It was a monster of propaganda, famously built of 80% arc-welded nickel steel because the Soviets assumed, incorrectly, that the Americans were building a fleet of Mach 3 bombers like the XB-70 Valkyrie. The West was terrified of its published performance, a fear that evaporated when a defector landed one in Japan. It was a one-trick pony. Its engines, two massive Tumansky turbojets, were a technological dead end. As one pilot aptly described them, they were little more than upgraded single-use cruise missile engines, hideously inefficient gulpers of kerosene that gave the aircraft the loiter time of a wet firecracker and a combat radius that was frankly embarrassing. But its real failure was not its engines, it was its brain. By the 1970s, the high-altitude bomber threat was dead. The new primary threat from NATO was low-altitude penetration, bombers, and more terrifyingly, waves of low-flying cruise missiles. The MiG-25, with its primitive radar, had no look-down, shoot-down capability. It was completely, hopelessly blind at low altitudes. Its radar could not distinguish a B-1 bomber or a Tomahawk missile from the ground clutter of the Earth below. This created a catastrophic, gaping vulnerability in Soviet air defense. The PVO, the Soviet Air Defense Forces, had invested billions in the world's fastest interceptor only to discover it was strategically useless against the actual threat. The MiG-31, therefore, was not a planned evolution. It was a panic-driven necessity, a machine conceived in desperation to plug the terrifying low-altitude gap its famous predecessor had torn wide open in the Iron Curtain. The problem the MiG-31 had to solve was one of geography. How do you defend 22 million square kilometers of territory, a border stretching over 20,000 kilometers, most of it comprised of the vast, empty, radarless expanses of the Arctic and Siberia? The PVO's answer was not a fighter in the Western sense. It was a flying radar barrier. The MiG-31 was conceived as an airborne mobile extension of the ground-based air defense network, a flying S-300. The doctrine developed for it was radical. A single flight of 4 MiG-31s, it was envisioned, would network together to form a coordinated patrol line, a barrier 800 to 900 kilometers wide, capable of scanning the airspace in front of them. The key to this was a piece of revolutionary avionics, the data link system. This secure automatic digital link allowed the 4 aircraft to share targeting data without a single radio transmission, fusing their sensor pictures into one coherent whole. This was network-centric warfare decades before the term became a marketing buzzword in the Pentagon. This data link enabled a form of distributed lethality that was decades ahead of its time. One MiG-31 could act as a mini AWACS, illuminating a target with its powerful radar, while other fighters in the group, or even less sophisticated aircraft like Sukhoi 27's or MiG-29's, could approach with their own radars off, launching their missiles in near-total electronic silence. This provided a massive tactical advantage. This inherent network nature, this design as a system of systems from day one, is a core reason why this 1970s airframe was a viable candidate for 21st century upgrades. It was a fifth-generation concept trapped in a third-generation body. To execute this mission, Mikoyan had to build a beast. The MiG-31 is a creature of brute force, a 46,000-kilogram colossus born from a cascade of engineering necessities. Its sheer size and weight are a direct consequence of the systems it was built to carry. The airframe itself is a unique metallurgical specimen, a more refined brute than its steel-clad father. The MiG-31 structure is 49% arc-welded nickel steel, 33% light metal alloy, 16% titanium, and a mere 2% composites. The heavy use of steel, a stark contrast to the all-titanium SR-71 it was meant to chase, was a pragmatic Soviet solution. It was cheaper, easier to weld, and perfectly capable of tolerating the intense kinetic heating generated at speeds approaching Mach 3. This massive high-drag airframe required an equally massive power plant, and here the MiG-31 made its single greatest leap over the Foxbat. Gone were the hideously inefficient turbojets. In their place, the designers installed a pair of afterburning turbofans. This was the aircraft's second revolution. The new engines, low-bypass turbofans derived from an engine family used on airliners, gave the MiG-31 something the MiG-25 never had: range. Suddenly, the aircraft had a ferry range of 3,300 kilometers, enough to actually patrol the endless Arctic expanses it was built to defend. But it was still a MiG. These engines are monsters, each producing over 34,000 pounds of force on full afterburner. They are what propels this 46-ton interceptor to its redline speed of Mach 2.83, or 3,000 kilometers per hour. It is noteworthy that this speed is not limited by thrust. It is temperature redlined. The engines could likely push the airframe past Mach 3, but doing so would pose unacceptable hazards to engine and airframe life, which is a polite engineering way of saying the wings would begin to melt or the engines would tear themselves apart. This power naturally comes at a cost. The fuel consumption is, to put it mildly, very high. The engines drink kerosene so fast that the weapon systems officer's secondary job is probably calculating the nearest divert field before the pilot has to explain to the base commander why an entire region's fuel reserve has vanished in a single sortie. That massive steel and titanium airframe, those continent-draining engines, they all exist for one reason. They are a high-speed, high-altitude truck built to carry a single piece of equipment, the Zaslon radar, NATO reporting name Flashdance. This radar is the soul of the MiG-31. It was quite simply the world's first passive electronically scanned array radar to ever enter service on a fighter aircraft. Its development was a nightmare. The PVO's requirement to see and kill 25-meter altitude cruise missiles against ground clutter was so difficult that the premier radar bureau tried and failed. In 1971, in a shotgun marriage typical of the Soviet system, the project was forcibly handed over to another research institute who had to make it work. And they did. The electronically scanned array technology was the key. Unlike a traditional radar which mechanically moves a dish back and forth, a process that could take 12 to 14 seconds for a full scan, the Zaslon steers its beam electronically. It can redirect its gaze near instantaneously. But this 1970s-era solution was again a brute force one. The Zaslon radar system weighed 1,000 kilograms. The 1.1-meter fixed antenna alone weighed 300 kilograms. This was double the weight of the F-14 Tomcat's enormous radar. To process the data from this behemoth, the MiG-31 was equipped with the first airborne digital computer in the USSR. This computer, likely possessing the processing power of a modern digital watch, was a marvel for its time. This entire one-ton assembly of high-voltage electronics and primitive digital processing achieved its goal. It could see bomber-sized targets at 200 kilometers, and crucially, it could track 10 targets at once, engaging 4 even if they were flying nap of the earth. The decision to field the Zaslon was a massive gamble, accepting enormous weight and cost penalties because it was the only path to solving the PVO's low-altitude gap. It cemented the MiG-31's fate. It would never be a fighter. It was a flying sensor platform, and all other design choices were slaves to this fact. The MiG-31 did not exist in a vacuum. Its only true contemporary was the U.S. Navy's F-14 Tomcat. On paper, they are twins, large two-seat twin-engine interceptors designed for long-range beyond visual range combat. But their diverging philosophies reveal everything about the doctrines that created them. The F-14 was a fleet defense interceptor, a guardian for the aircraft carrier. The MiG-31 was a homeland defense interceptor, a guardian for the entire Siberian landmass. The F-14's radar was a mechanically scanned pulse Doppler set, but it was incredibly powerful, able to track 24 targets and engage 6. The MiG-31 Zaslon was electronically scanned, scanning faster but tracking 10 and engaging only 4. The real difference, however, was in the claws. The F-14 carried the AIM-54 Phoenix, a 185-kilometer range missile with active radar homing. This meant the F-14 could launch its missiles and immediately go defensive, as the missile would guide itself in the terminal phase. The MiG-31, by contrast, carried the weapon that used semi-active radar homing. This was a critical and seemingly inferior choice. It meant the MiG-31 had to maintain its radar lock, painting the target all the way to impact, making itself a massive, non-maneuvering target. Why this apparent flaw? Because the F-14 was designed as a hunter, a lethal individual platform. The MiG-31 was designed as a fence post, an element of a network. The simpler guidance was cheaper and perfectly good enough for its intended non-maneuvering targets, bombers, and cruise missiles. Furthermore, the F-14, with its revolutionary variable sweep wings, was also a fearsome dogfighter. The MiG-31, with its 5G structural limit, was not. It was, as one foreign pilot who flew it described, too big and clumsy for use in dogfights. The F-14 was a rapier, the MiG-31 was a 1,000-kilogram flying anvil. This brings us to the operational realities. Like all ambitious Soviet projects, the MiG-31's on-paper capabilities often require a ritual dance to summon in the real world. It is a hideously demanding and high-maintenance aircraft. An Indian air marshal, the first foreigner to fly it, described the weapon systems officer's rear cockpit as feeling like being seated in a submarine, complete with a big periscope to see outside and an old screen that was not good for situational awareness. But the most telling and frankly terrifying glimpse into its soul comes from a friendly fire incident on April 26, 2017. During a training exercise, a modernized MiG-31 locked up and shot down its own wingman. The official report, as they always do, blamed pilot error. But the leaked document revealed a horrifying technical flaw. The upgraded radar and the new fire control computer were not working properly. The system misidentified its friendly wingman as an alien target. The ground crews were reportedly aware of this abnormal operation. The rumored cause is the perfect metaphor for Soviet-style upgrades. The new processor could not handle the sheer volume of data coming from the massive new radar. In essence, the upgraded brain was too small for the upgraded eyes. To compensate, pilots had reportedly developed their own experimental workaround, manually pulsing the radar on and off in flight to reduce the workload on the fire control computer. This is the very definition of gallows humor in engineering. To possess the most powerful fighter radar in the world, but to be forced to use it like a faulty light switch to prevent it from killing your friends. This perfectly captures the machine's character, a titan of brute force held together by ingenuity and peril. The 2017 incident, while alarming, was a flaw in the modernization program. And that program is the primary reason the MiG-31 is still in service. It was not just life extended, it was reborn. Approved in 2008, this deep upgrade transformed the aircraft. The old Zaslon was replaced by the Zaslon M. This was a quantum leap. The antenna grew to 1.4 meters in diameter. The detection range exploded, with sources claiming it can see targets out to 320 or even 400 kilometers. The tracking capacity jumped to 24 targets with the ability to engage 6 or even 8 simultaneously. The old computer was replaced with a new digital processor. And in the cockpit, the 1970s steam gauges and the weapon systems officer's green submarine periscope were finally replaced with modern informative multifunction displays, creating a glass cockpit. This new sniper needed a new bullet. The modernized variant is armed with a hypersonic missile reaching speeds of Mach 6. Its engagement range is an incredible 150 to 400 kilometers, depending on the profile. And crucially, it solves the original flaw. It has an active radar homing seeker, allowing it to guide itself in the terminal phase. This combination, the 400-kilometer range radar and the 400-kilometer range missile, is the entire justification for the aircraft's 21st century existence. It creates a sensor-shooter parity at extreme ranges that is unmatched. The modernized MiG-31 is the only air-to-air system in the world that can see what it can shoot and shoot what it can see at this beyond visual range squared distance. This has transformed its role into that of a dedicated AWACS hunter. It is designed to snipe high-value, low-maneuverability assets like AWACS, tankers, and command aircraft from a distance well outside the protective bubble of their fighter escorts. This is not a theoretical threat. This exact system has reportedly been the main threat against Ukrainian forces since late 2022, scoring multiple long-range kills and forcing pilots to fly perilously low to avoid detection. As if this rebirth as the world's longest-range air-to-air sniper wasn't enough, the MiG-31's brute force 1970s design gifted it a second utterly bizarre and even more strategic new life. This variant is not an interceptor, it is a strategic strike platform. The specialized variant is a carrier aircraft modified to launch one weapon and one weapon only, the Kinjal or Dagger. The Kinjal is an air-launched ballistic missile, a heavily modified version of the ground-based Iskander missile. It is nuclear-capable, travels at hypersonic speeds up to Mach 10, and has a staggering range of 2,000 kilometers when combined with the aircraft's own reach. To carry this behemoth, the MiG-31 is mutilated. It is stripped of its entire identity. The massive Zaslon radar is removed. The cannon is ripped out. All its air-to-air missile pylons are gone. In their place, it receives an increased fuel supply and superior communications equipment to receive targeting data from off-board sensors. This variant's only job is to act as a reusable first stage. It performs the one trick it has always known. It flies very, very fast at Mach 2.3 and very, very high, giving the Kinjal the initial boost of speed and altitude it needs to achieve its advertised performance. This capability radically alters the strategic balance. Launching a ballistic missile from an unpredictable high-speed aerial platform makes interception infinitely more difficult than targeting a fixed ground-based launcher. And so the MiG-31's original flaw, being a clumsy, non-maneuvering steel and titanium dragster built only for speed and altitude, became its single greatest 21st century asset. The PVO's 1970s solution for killing the SR-71 accidentally became the 21st century solution for boosting a strategic hypersonic weapon. So why is the MiG-31 still in service? The answer is that the MiG-31 doesn't exist anymore. The 1970s airframe, which first flew in 1975, has proven to be an incredibly robust and adaptable canvas. This has allowed it to evolve into three distinct, highly specialized, and lethally effective avatars that share a common body. First is the interceptor, the original Cold War fence post, now largely extinct or upgraded. Second is the sniper, the modernized variant. This is the 21st century AWACS killer, a networked 400-kilometer range air-to-air dominance platform that creates a bubble of no-go airspace for critical Western assets. Third is the Striker, the ballistic missile carrier. This is the radar-less strategic weapon, a reusable rocket booster whose only purpose is to hurl the Kinjal ballistic missile at its target. The Russian Defense Ministry plans to keep this airframe in service until at least 2030, having already extended its service life. While an air dominance fighter like the F-22 Raptor is a true stealth fighter that a MiG-31 is practically blind to in a one-on-one fight, the F-22 cannot do the MiG-31's jobs. It cannot patrol the vast Russian Arctic without a massive and non-existent tanker fleet. It cannot carry 400-kilometer range active homing missiles. And it certainly cannot launch a 2,000-kilometer range ballistic missile. The MiG-31 endures because it is the ultimate expression of a specific brutalist design philosophy. It was designed for a niche role, high speed, high altitude, heavy payload that the world thought was obsolete. But by being the absolute best at that one obsolete niche, its core performance parameters became the perfect accidental solution for two new 21st century niches. It is still in service because for the very specific, very brutal jobs it is asked to do, nothing else in the world can compete. Yet beneath this triumphant narrative of accidental genius and adaptive rebirth lies a more sobering reality. The MiG-31 fleet is not immortal, and its future is anything but certain. Russia inherited approximately 370 MiG-31 airframes from the Soviet Union after its collapse in 1991. Today, fewer than 110 are believed to be operational, with perhaps 130 total in inventory, including those in storage and undergoing modernization. The attrition has been brutal, not from combat, but from the relentless grind of age, maintenance failures, and the chronic underfunding that plagued Russian military aviation throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. Each aircraft is now a precious and irreplaceable asset. There is no production line to build more. The factories in Gorky, now Nizhny Novgorod, that birthed these machines fell silent in 1994. The tooling is gone, the expertise scattered or retired, the supply chains dissolved. Every MiG-31 lost to accident, every airframe that reaches the end of its fatigue life is a permanent reduction in capability that cannot be recovered. This creates a strategic clock that is ticking louder with each passing year. The modernization program, while impressive, is also revealing the limits of what can be achieved. You can upgrade the radar, replace the computers, install new weapons, but you cannot change the fundamental metallurgical reality of an airframe that has been stressed by decades of high-speed, high-altitude flight. Steel fatigues, welds crack, titanium components corrode in ways that are difficult to detect and impossible to reverse. The Russian Air Force has reportedly extended the operational life of the fleet to 40,000 flight hours per airframe, a figure that sounds impressive until you realize it is being extracted from machines that were originally certified for far less. This is not engineering confidence, this is desperation dressed up as capability. The maintenance burden grows exponentially as the fleet ages. The 2017 friendly fire incident was not an isolated anomaly, it was a symptom. It revealed that even the most critical upgrades, the new radars and computers that are supposed to keep these machines relevant, are being integrated into airframes and systems that are fundamentally incompatible with the demands being placed upon them. The fact that pilots were reportedly developing their own unofficial workarounds, manually cycling radar power to prevent fratricide is not a testament to Russian ingenuity. It is evidence of systemic failure, a fleet operating at the ragged edge of reliability held together by institutional knowledge and improvisation rather than sound engineering practice. And yet the brutal calculus of geopolitics ensures these machines will continue to fly. Russia has no alternative. The PAK-DP program, the long-promised next-generation interceptor intended to replace the MiG-31, remains a paper dream. It has been in development since 2011 and has produced nothing but computer renderings and optimistic press releases. The program is reportedly stalled, underfunded, and lacking critical technologies, particularly in the realm of advanced electronics and propulsion. Even if it were to succeed, serial production would not begin until the late 2020s at the earliest, and initial operational capability would lag years behind that. By the time a replacement arrives, if it ever does, the MiG-31 fleet will be so diminished and so aged that there will be a gaping hole in Russian air defense and strike capabilities that cannot be filled. This is the true paradox of the Foxhound. It is simultaneously indispensable and unsustainable, a machine that must continue flying precisely because there is nothing to replace it, even as every flight hour brings it closer to the point where it physically cannot continue. The Russian military leadership understands this, which is why they are ruthlessly prioritizing the most capable airframes. The Kinzhal carriers, the MiG-31K variants, receive the best maintenance, the newest parts, the most careful handling. They are the strategic crown jewels, and every effort is being made to keep them operational. Similarly, the modernized MiG-31BM interceptors, the AWACS killers, are being preserved and upgraded in preference to older variants. The original baseline MiG-31's, the machines that still carry the old Zaslon radar and lack the modern avionics, are being quietly retired or cannibalized for parts to keep their more valuable siblings flying. This is triage, not transformation. The fleet is shrinking, and within that shrinking pool, resources are being concentrated on the platforms that deliver the highest strategic return. It is a rational response to an impossible situation, but it is also a countdown. In perhaps a decade, maybe less, the number of operational MiG-31's will have declined to the point where they can no longer fulfill their missions. The Arctic patrol lines will have gaps, the AWACS hunting missions will become untenable due to lack of available aircraft, and the Kinzhal strike capability will be reduced to a token force. At that point, the 50-year odyssey of the Foxhound will finally end, not with a bang, but with a whimper, as the last flyable airframes are grounded by fatigue, by lack of spares, or simply by the reality that there are no longer enough of them left to matter. And when that day comes, the world will witness something remarkable. It will mark the end of the last operational aircraft from the golden age of Soviet interceptor design, the final retirement of a philosophy of aerial warfare that prioritized raw speed and brutal payload capacity over stealth and maneuverability. The MiG-31 will take with it into history a unique combination of capabilities that may never be replicated. No future aircraft will likely match its combination of sustained high speed, extreme altitude performance, massive radar power, and the ability to network 4 aircraft into a cohesive patrol line spanning nearly 1,000 kilometers. These were solutions to problems that no longer exist in the form they once did, yet paradoxically, they became solutions to problems that didn't exist when the aircraft was designed. That accidental relevance, that bizarre second life as both an AWACS killer and a hypersonic missile carrier, was a gift of physics and engineering that cannot be deliberately recreated. It emerged from a specific confluence of Cold War paranoia, Soviet industrial capability, and doctrinal requirements that will never align again in quite the same way. The lesson of the MiG-31 is not that old aircraft can always be modernized into relevance. Most cannot. The lesson is that sometimes if you build something that is absolutely uncompromising in pursuit of a specific set of performance parameters, Even if those parameters seem obsolete, you create a tool that can be unexpectedly useful when the world changes in ways you never anticipated. The MiG-31 was never supposed to be a strategic strike platform, but its ability to fly at Mach 2.3 at 17,000 meters made it perfect for that role. It was never supposed to hunt AWACS aircraft 400 kilometers away, but its combination of massive radar and long-range missiles made it uniquely suited for exactly that mission. It survived because it was so extremely good at doing the thing it was designed to do that when new missions emerged that required those same extreme capabilities, there was nothing else that could fill the role. That is the final paradox of the Foxhound. It is a machine that should be obsolete, that by all reasonable measures is obsolete, but remains desperately necessary because the specific flavor of obsolescence it represents happens to be exactly what is needed right now. And that is why, for a few more years at least, these 50-year-old steel and titanium monsters will continue to thunder down runways across Russia, carrying either hypersonic missiles into the sky or hunting for high-value targets at ranges that most modern fighters can only dream of reaching until the day comes when the last one finally, inevitably